a question this morning. Do you know what you're saying? That's the title of my sermon. Do you know what you're saying? You know, I've thought through what are some. It's my desire to see God work in the church here. It's my desire to see God work in our city. It's my desire to see God work in this world. And I believe it's some of your desires. And I know it's God's desire. I know it is. But I think there's some things that we need to take a look at that might be hindering Him, that He didn't feel like that He can quite move just yet. And it could be some of the things we're saying. Do you know what you're saying? I'm going to share with you some quotes from a book. The title of it is Gestures by Roger Extel. At the opening session of the Bangladesh new parliament a few years ago, legislators reacted with fury toward a shipping minister who when they asked him the question, and he answered it with this gesture. You see, in the United States, this means what? Okay. It means okay, or it means good going. Something to that effect. But in Bangladesh, it doesn't mean the same thing. In Bangladesh, it's the same thing that this is as if we would lift our hand up with the middle finger up in the air. And you say, Pastor Doyce, you know that. Why would you say something like that? Because I wanted to shake us up just a little bit to realize that sometimes some of the things we say are worse than that. Are worse than that. Do we know what we're saying? This man, he didn't know what he was saying. Sometimes we don't. When Richard Nixon was vice president, he greeted a crowd in Latin America and did the same thing and got the same response. He didn't know what he was saying. In America, a tapping of the head on the finger, with the finger. What does that mean? That means smart. That means smart. But it doesn't mean the same thing in Holland. You know what it means? Crazy. You could go, you're real. And in Holland, it'd be the wrong thing to say. Sometimes some things are right somewhere in certain places, but other places we say things we don't need to be saying. We shouldn't be saying them. In America, there's a sign that we do this. That means what? Crazy. But in Argentina, you know what it means? You have a phone call. You have a phone call. You know, we often take our hands and we talk to people and we stick them in our pockets and we talk to them. I do. I preach sometime up here and I put my hands in my pocket. That's just something I do. But don't do that in Indonesia or in France or in Japan. You know what you're telling them? I don't want to hear what you're saying. I don't want to hear what you're saying. So sometimes we don't have any idea of what we're saying. So it's important that we know what we say. Sometimes I think our words just go freely and bounce around, and we don't realize the effect that it's having on those around us. To us, it's good words. It's not bad. And some of that is because we were raised in a certain way, in a certain thing, and not raised in a spiritual idea that sometimes we need to just be quiet and we don't need to express what we're feeling inside. Some of us, we get into trouble or we get God into trouble because we say things because our emotions dictate to us. And it's not God working in our heart. Colossians 4:6 says, let your speech be always with grace. Wait a minute, let me read that again. It says, let your speech always be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. Every man. That includes everybody. The word grace has a couple of meanings here. It means skills that are needed for behaving in a polite way in social situations. Grace. Knowing how to act and the way to be and what to say in social situations. It also means unmerited favor. Unmerited favor. And then he says season. The word season, that means, what does seasoning do? It makes things tasty. Our speech that we say, the things we say, it should be things that make things taste good. Good taste, things of good taste. And then he says with salt. What does salt do? Salt preserves from corruption. It gives life. It's like a life preserver. So he's saying, let's read in the New Living Testament. He says it a little different. He says, let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response to everyone. Let me give you another translation. If we put all these together, this is sort of how it sums it up. It says, our speech should be that which is not tasteless or repulsive to the hearer, but should give life to all who listen. What we say should be giving life. Let me ask you a question this morning. Do you know what you're saying when you repeat what someone else has said? So Pastor Doyce, never thought about that. Do you know what you're saying when you repeat something someone else has already said? Ezekiel 7:26 in the New Living Testament says, calamity will follow calamity, rumor will follow rumor. When I was a young boy, loved to go to my granddad, my mother's father. He was always my buddy. He'd always give me ice cream, and when I come in, that'd be the first thing. He'd go back there and give me a biscuit with jelly on it. My grandma would make this chocolate syrup that you pour over biscuits, and he would give me that, and he would always sugar me up, and he would do things for me, and he'd come in, and there would be others. See, I was his favorite. He would come in and sneak a Snickers bar in my pocket. He said, shh, don't tell Grandma. He didn't want me to tell Grandma. Probably her Snicker bar. But I went and spent about 3 days with him one time in the summer. I think it was the first time I ever stayed out there. And I was around him quite a bit. Well, I went home after that. My granddad was not a Christian. As far as I know, unless Jesus worked in his life, he left this world not a Christian. And anyway, so I'm at home, and my mom, she said something that I don't remember what it was, but I didn't like what she said, and I didn't want to do what she said. And so I repeated Grandpa. I said, Mom, I don't want to. You just need to go to blank. That day I learned it's very important. You know what you say. Very important. You see, when we repeat things we have heard, we don't always know what they're saying. We don't know even if they are true. We don't know. We don't realize the effect our words are going to have on others and even on ourselves. Several years ago, I was watching the news, and I don't know when this happened, but remember Johnny Carson? Anybody know who that is? He used to be the late night show. He was the main dude, that late night show talk host on the Tonight Show, I believe it was. And he was on there, and he was talking. You know how he would joke around and stuff. And he come out and made a comment that there was a shortage of toilet paper. You know what happened the next day? Stores were wiped out because he said there was a shortage of toilet paper just because of something that he was saying. And he said it jokingly, but they took him seriously. Do you know when you say something like that, it travels a long ways, a long ways. You know, scientists tells us that sound waves set into motion by our voices go upon an endless journey through space. Do you know that? And if you had an instrument that was delicate enough, powerful enough, we could say something now, and we could get in a spaceship and travel days later and land in this place. And if you had that machine, eventually that sound would come to you, and you would hear yourself talking, saying that. It keeps coming. Sound keeps traveling on and on and on. Well, you know, I thought about that. You don't even have to have one of those machines for that to happen here. You don't even have to have one of those machines, whatever they might be, or that device, that special device. Because when you say something, if you wait long enough, it's going to come back to you. Have you found that out? If you say something, it's going to come back to you, and it's going to go through somebody else and come right back. Personal example. I had something, I know what I just said is true. I had something that I have said to an individual in years past, and I said, if you would hold this in confidence, please do not share this. And it was less than a day. An individual come back and told me what I'd said, and that's the only person that knew. It comes back around. Sometimes it don't take very long. Several years ago, so it'll get some of y'all out of trouble, not all of you. I thought, you know, I'm going to see how this works. I told someone a lie. And I didn't say anything. And I just wanted to see how long it would take for it to come back around, and I would hear it. Anyone want to believe I did? I did. I shared this when it happened, and I had people come to me, was that me? Was that me? Was that me? Psalms 41:6 says, they visit me as if they were my friends, but all the while they gather gossip, and when they leave, they spread it everywhere. Can you believe that's a scripture? Proverbs 29:19, a gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. I want to give you 4 things real quickly that you should ask yourself before you repeat something someone else has told you. Okay? 1, do I know the fact that what was told is the truth? Okay? That's something for sure we need to know. Was that truth? Do I know for a fact that was truth? 2, even if it is true, does it hurt or demoralize or tear down someone? Okay? Even if it's true. How would I feel if it was me someone was talking about? If I turned the tables and I was the one that it was being said about, how would I feel? And the last one is, would God be pleased with my conversation if He was one of the listeners? Would God be pleased with my conversation if He was one of the listeners? Just a thought here. I thought I might throw this in. He's always listening. He's always listening. Everything you say, He hears. He knows the very intent of what you say. He doesn't just know the words. Sometimes we say things and we don't mean what we say, and God knows you don't mean what you say. Sometimes people don't know that, but God does. Another question. Do you know what you're saying when you say one thing and your actions and reactions say something else? Luke, I think sometimes our problem is our words don't measure up to our actions. And sometimes our actions don't measure up to our words. Luke 6:43-45 says, for a good tree bringeth not forth corrupt fruit, neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. For every tree is known by its fruit. I read this before, haven't I? Not too long ago. For of thorns men do not gather figs, nor of a bramble bush gather they grapes. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaketh. My grandpa Whitley, I'm going to talk about him again. Went out to visit him, and it might have been the same time, very same time even, that I was out there. And my mother had a couple of uncles, Marlin and Dawn, and they would take me hunting a lot, and I'd go hunting with them and at an older age. But I used to go out in the yard with them, and we were out there one day, and we were around this tree, and my granddad had some fruit trees. And I asked one of my uncles one time, I said, that tree up there, what kind of fruit is that? He says, oh, that's a miniature peach tree. I says, oh, really? They said, well, as a matter of fact, we'd like to have some. Let us put you up in there in the tree, and you get a pocket full of them, bring them down, and we'll eat them. Sounded good to me. They lifted me up, pushed me up the tree. I climbed up and started putting them in my pocket. I had a little jacket on, started putting them in my jacket pocket and stuff, and just filled them up, And then they reached down, got me, and climbed down, and I got down, and I sat down, and I started pulling them out, and I handed them some, and one of my uncles took one of them and started putting it in his mouth, and he said, no. He said, you got them down, you deserve to get the first one, and he tossed it to me. I thought, oh, cool, man, and I stuck it in my mouth, and I bit down. And the way it felt was as if you took a vacuum cleaner and stuck it to your lips. That's the way it was, really. And I said, what? Well, do you know what kind of fruit that was? It wasn't a miniature peach. It was a green persimmon. A green persimmon. And if you've ever had one of those, the problem is we say we are peach trees, and we have persimmons on our limbs. And we're making the world pucker up at us. You may think no one notices. What you're saying is different than the way you're living. But they do. They know. They know more than you think they know, just because they don't say something or they don't say something to you. 3 boys were out playing in the hood, out throwing rocks at each other. All of a sudden, a little puppy come out from around the corner. They ran over, and one picked up the puppy and held him. And the other said, well, I want that puppy. He said, no, I want that puppy. And all 3 of them wanted the puppy. One of them came up with the idea, said, I'll tell you what, let's play a game, and whoever wins the game will get the puppy. All of them agreed on it. So one starts talking, and he starts, the game was this. It was whoever told the best lie would get the puppy. So one started telling a lie, and all of a sudden around the corner, this preacher come walking up. He said he thought the boys were up to something no good, and he said, what are y'all doing? And they said, well, this little puppy, and they told him what they were going to do and how they were going to get the puppy and stuff. And he said, well, I want to tell you something. He says, it's wrong for y'all to lie. Y'all don't need to be lying. He said, when I was your age, I never told a lie. One little boy, he sort of looked down, and he shook his head, sort of got a tear in his eye, and he looked up and he says, give him the puppy. A good little example of how it may seem like even children know. Children maybe sometimes are more sensitive, to some of that than you think they are. Luke 6:45, the New Living Testament says, a good man produces good deeds from a good heart, and an evil man produces evil deeds from his hidden wickedness. Whatever is in the heart overflows into the speech. Whatever's in the heart comes out. Another question, do you know what you're saying according to other people's ears? Do you know what you're saying according to other people's ears? Sometimes we know what we say, but do we know what they're hearing? James 1:19 says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. In the 7th grade, I had an art teacher, Mr. Barron. I liked Mr. Barron because I liked art. And the first day in class, he walks in. And it's loud. People are talking, kids up and around. And Mr. Barron, I don't know if he had polio when he was smaller, but he had a brace on his leg, and he limped. He'd come limping in. And he'd come limping in, and people, they wouldn't pay attention to him. He tried to say something, they didn't pay attention to him. And so he took his hand, and he slammed it down. He said, I demand pandemonium. What? Pandemonium. Right. It's good to have a wife. I demand pandemonium. And everybody just, what did they do? They just got quiet and settled down. What does pandemonium mean? Huh? It means a tumult of a loud uproar. Pandemonium. Did they do what he said? Why? Because the actions spoke louder than the words. The actions spoke louder than the words. It's our actions that really reveal the real condition of our heart. It's what's down deep inside that's hidden down there that sometimes comes out. It's how we react in everyday little situations. When everything seems wrong, that tells us the true self. How do we respond when everything's going wrong? You know, I believe God wants us, and I'm saying this because God's speaking to me about this. God's speaking to me about this in my own heart. I'm not just saying this to you. How do we react in situations? I think we ought to have the joy of the Lord in our heart in all things, because the joy of the Lord is our strength. And the enemy, the devil, will come at us in a lot of ways that will try to get us to react wrong. He'll try to stir up that little thing that's within your heart, that little carnal nature inside. Our response tells others, really, how much of the love of Jesus we have in our heart. How we respond to people, our actions. How much of the love of Jesus we have in our heart. Most of the time, we just say or express how we feel, and it just, the reason we do that, because it feels good to dump on somebody else. To just let it out on, so just dump it on people. And so we let it out, and then we feel so much better. It's sort of like a skunk. That skunk comes by, and I'm sure it's when he gets through. But you know what? There sure is a lot of stink where he's left it. We went, was it Oklahoma? And I'm not serious. I didn't see them all, but I knew they were there. We smelled more skunks when we went to Oklahoma the last time than we have anywhere else. But that stink gets on people, and it causes and turns people off, you see. And sometimes that stuff gets on them. If self is denied, what do? If we fight that within inside us, if we're trying to be like Jesus, we won't allow that self to control us. If self is denied in situations that are hard, we'll praise God. We'll lift up the name of Jesus. We'll rejoice. We'll give thanks. We'll be an encourager. We'll try to help people. If self's not denied, you know what we become? A lot of times just grumpy old men and grouchy old women. We do. That's just what we become. We become difficult for people. when everything goes wrong and nothing seems right. We have to deny that inner compulsion to complain. You ever find yourself just complaining? I complain, and I don't realize it. I catch myself saying, you know what I'm doing? I'm just complaining. I don't realize it, but I'm just complaining. That's what I'm doing. The things I'm saying, I'm complaining. It sounds good, and maybe it's even true, but I'm complaining. To retaliate or to become angry. People won't hear what you are saying until they see what you are doing is demonstrating what you are saying. People won't hear what you're saying until they see what you're doing demonstrates what you're saying. Our words go with our actions. It's important we know what we're saying, but how important is it? Matthew tells us, he says in Matthew 12, 36, 37, he says, every one of these careless words is going to come back and haunt you. There will be a time of reckoning. Words are powerful. Take them seriously. Words can be your salvation. Words can also be your damnation. But you know what? It's not only important that we know what we're saying, it's even more important that we know what God is saying to us. That's even more important. One last question I'm going to leave with you here in conclusion. What has He said to you this morning? I believe He spoke to you. Maybe as the songs were being sung, the Spirit of God was revealing things to your heart and talking to your heart. Maybe as we shared here, God was speaking to you about something. My question is, when God speaks to you and you come in, how are you going to respond to when God speaks to you? How do we respond? You know, not a lot of people come just when we have an altar call, just come and flood the altars. I believe that there should be a lot of people at the altars all the time. I do. I believe that. And it's not because of my preaching. I'm not talking about that. But me as a pastor, or I believe this would be true for most pastors, is I would rather you not respond, but change. Oh, I want to see people down here praying, and I think that's the way you're going to change, is through prayer and through talking to God. That's the way it's going to happen. Getting down on your knees and confessing to God and listening to God and let God show you how to change in areas of our life. But I would rather see change instead of the altars full, because you know what? I believe that will fill the altars. When we change, our passion will be God. Our passion won't be, we'll be cautious what we say. We'll be cautious how we say it. We'll be cautious what's on us when we say it. We'll be cautious because we're concerned about the other person and we're not concerned so much about ourselves. We want to know, we don't want our words to affect someone wrong that would hinder their understanding of what Christianity is. We want to be the right example. We want to be that light. We want to be that person that when they're around us, they feel the love of God in our heart and our life. What's God saying to you this morning? Let's stand. If you need to pray, you come pray.